Welcome to Americana Archives. Today's headline is Mormon History, 2 bloody pages in the record of Utah Territory. The subheadline says, Assassination committed by order of Brigham Young. The killing of Hartley at Orson Hyde's command. Yates removal. This article originally came from the special Salt Lake City, Utah Territory letter. It says, one of the most cruel, heartless, and causeless murders ever perpetrated was that of Jesse T. Hartley by the Destroying Angels in Utah. The bloody crime, the perpetrators of which were known but never punished, was committed near Fort Bridger, Utah Territory in 1852 by the express orders of the Mormon Church. The order, it has been admitted by one of the assassins, was conveyed to them by a son of the so-called prophet, seer, and revelator. Hartley was a well-educated young man and a lawyer by profession. He had recently come from the States with the tide of immigration, settled at Salt Lake City, married a Mormon woman named Bullock, and joined the Mormon Church. Whether he joined the church for policy or belief is unknown, but it's certain that his belief in the prophet, if ever he had any, was soon dispelled, and he began to show that belief in his actions and wrote letters to his friends exposing the secrets of the endowment house. Being suspected of apostasy, his letters were intercepted, and the Mormon Church authorities claimed that they had the necessary proof. When a person joins the Mormon Church, he or she takes an oath that they will submit to the blood atonement and expiation of that sin. This apostasy and violation of oath is held to be a sin which only the lifeblood of the sinner can wash away. Until the arrival of General Albert Sidney Johnson's army in 1858 to quell the Mormon insurrection, this human sacrifice was practiced among the saints. The victim, who had voluntarily given up his life for his transgression or apostasy, was dressed in the habiliments of the grave, and after certain ceremonials, which passed for prayer, his throat was cut, and he was thus saved from eternal damnation. These human sacrifices were executed in a typical Garden of Eden in the endowment house. Apostates have testified that these barbarous rites were practiced, and named some of the victims. Mrs. Hartley, the murdered man's widow, stated that such was the creed and nature of the oath administered. She also stated that her husband told her, after he had been discovered, that Brigham Young required him to lay down his life and submit to blood atonement in one of the rooms of the endowment house, where such atonement is made. The prophet says if they submit to it, he can save them, otherwise they are lost. These are the words of Mormons who had rebelled against the murderous authority of the so-called church. Hartley refused to walk into the endowment house and be murdered. He was cut off from the church, and it is a part of the history of Utah that Brigham Young said from the pulpit on the next Sunday, "This man Hartley has been writing against the church. His throat should be cut, and he should be sent to hell across lots." To hell across lots was a favorite expression of the Mormons, without any particular meaning, only that of killing the person against whom the anathema was launched. After that denunciation, Hartley's friends avoided him. His doom was sealed. He kissed his wife and babe goodbye, and set out alone for the States. The last words his nearly heartbroken wife said to him were, "We shall never meet again. They will murder you." Orson Hyde, the head of the 12 apostles and next in authority to Brigham Young, was at Fort Bridger with a portion of the Nauvoo Legion. These Danites were under the immediate command of General Daniel H. Wells, one of the 12 apostles, and who it is said officiated in the murderous rites of blood atoning. The infamous Bill Hickman commanded a company of Danites. Joseph A. Young, so the testimony of one of the assassins reads, brought the order from his father to Apostle Orson Hyde, who said, "I have orders to have Hartley used up." This was a modification of sent to hell across lots. Hickman and another trusted destroying angel named George Boyd was deputized to use him up. They rode with Hartley a few miles, chatting pleasantly, and while they were crossing a deep stream, Hickman shot the unsuspecting Hartley through the head. His corpse floated down the stream, the assassins not even giving it a burial. They washed the blood from the saddle and led the dead man's horse back to camp as a trophy. Apostle Hyde had ridden around upon the mountainside and witnessed the scene, after which he rode up to the angels and said that it was well done. The murder of Richard Yates was revolting and cowardly in the extreme. It was, however, from different motives, gold and not fanaticism being the incentive. This was in 1858. Yates was a trader and had a train of wagons loaded with goods, ammunition, etc., valued at about $10,000. He had halted on Green River and was buying beef cattle for the United States government. The Mormons offered to purchase ammunition, but Yates refused to sell it to them, knowing that they were in insurrection against the United States government. One day, riding out too far beyond his camp and alone, Yates was captured by some prowling Danites. He was carried to Fort Bridger and placed in a stone corral and a guard placed over him. General Wells ordered Bill Hickman to take him to Salt Lake, saying, "Yates ought to be killed, but take him along. You will probably get an order when you get to Colonel Jones's camp." This camp was at the mouth of Echo Canyon on the Weber River and guarded that narrow defile. It is about as wide as a wagon road, and the perpendicular walls rise to the height of 2,000 feet. From these high walls, the Mormons rolled down stones upon Johnson's advancing army, and from one of these peaks, a boy was shot and killed by a soldier, the only victim of the Mormon War. It was in the mouth of Echo Canyon that Brigham Young preached his first sermon in Utah on their flight from Nauvoo, and on the same spot was committed one of the most revolting murders that ever stained the earth. Yates was shackled, and accompanying Bill Hickman as a guard were his brothers T.J. Hickman, John Flack, and Lewis Macomb. They took from Yates his watch and $1,900. On arriving at the mouth of the canyon, they were met by Joseph A. Young with an order from his father the prophet, ordering that Yates be used up. Colonel Jones directed him where to camp with the doomed man. About midnight, Colonel Jones and a lawyer named Hosea Stout came to the camp to see if the time was appropriate for the commission of the damnable deed. Hickman had directed the others of the guard to go to sleep and sat alone guarding the prisoner. With a bowie knife drawn, Colonel Jones stood over him, and while Hosea Stout held a lantern, Hickman the fiend killed the man while asleep, cutting his head open with an axe. They rolled the corpse in a blanket, dug a shallow grave on the spot, and buried it. Then they moved the campfire onto the grade so as to destroy traces of fresh earth. Flack awoke about this time and saw what was going on. Hickman agreed to give him a share of the money in order to quiet him, but on reporting to Brigham, as they were in duty bound, they were reprimanded for asking such a thing and ordered to turn the money over to the church to go toward paying the expenses of the war. This they did, but it knocked all the Mormonism out of Flack. He turned Gentile and returned to New York. For many years, it was believed that Yates had been killed by Indians, but rumors grew into suspicion, and the body was disinterred, being found at the exact spot designated by one of the murderers who had turned state's evidence. But the criminals were never brought to justice. The church gathered up all the dead man's property and placed it to the expense account of the war against the United States government. This article was written by J.M. Scanlon. This article came from the great state of Illinois, being reported in the Illinois Weekly Courier of September 14th, 1892. Thank you for joining us today. If you want to continue to uncover all of America's lost and forgotten history, then remember before you leave to hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and remember to like and comment below. And we will see you next time on Americana Archives.